So welcome to the Unity editor here. I have a first 3D scene in here. So when you open up the editor, it probably looks like this. One of the things I want to do first is maybe change the layout a little bit. So I'll show you how I like to work. Okay. So but maybe I'll go through some of the windows first and then we'll start moving them around. So on the left, you see the hierarchy. This is where you see the objects in your scene. I'm just double clicking them to quickly zoom onto them, and it actually basically changes the camera perspective, the camera of the editor here, the scene editor. Okay, so in this scene view, I can drag with the mouse like this to select multiple objects, or can actually click them more or less directly. I can right click and then the mouse cursor turns into something like this, and I can move my mouse to like look around. I can use WASD to fly around, so forward, backward, and I often use this to kind of like move around in the scene. Another way to do this would be to use these things up here. So for example, you can very quickly have a top-down view by just pressing that, and you can switch between perspective and orthogonal camera or orthographic camera, but we'll just leave it as a perspective camera. So you can press Control Alt to select all the objects. You can click here, you can click with Control, and if I had more objects in here, could also shift click to select an entire range of game objects. So the things here on the left are called game objects. Whenever you click one, you see in the inspector, you see information about them. These are all what we call components. So the camera has a transform like every game object. Even if it's not rendered, has a transform, it's somewhere in the scene. And in this case, a camera component that actually makes it a camera. If I deactivate that component, it is actually, you see how the logo changes. It's actually not a camera anymore. But now we're going to make it a camera. And so it is a camera. And here we have a light. And so if we deactivate this, you can see how kind of like looks like deactivated. The light component isn't actually active in that case. So a camera always has this preview here when you click it, but you will see we're going to insert an object now. I can insert an object in multiple different ways. I can right click here, create an object like this. It places it where did it put it? So it puts it at a weirdo location. we can fix this in a second. I'm gonna insert another object. So I did it before, I did it here. Now I'm gonna right click. I cannot right click here. So I guess this is one way to do it. The other way to do it would be like click game object up here, 3D object, and then a sphere. But I just like to do it like this because I also sometimes like to create groups. So here we're gonna create a group, an empty game object, and now inside this group I want to insert a let's do, what else do we have, a cylinder, and I also want to insert into this group a plane. Okay, so a couple of things in here, and it's very interesting how these now turn out. They're kind of like at random locations. So let's sort things out. First of all, the group moves together. Now I have a translate tool here that moves the group together, but I want to have this at 0 because this is where our floor is supposed to be, and the plane within this group is also at 0, and the cylinder sits more or less on top of it, but it's actually halfway. So I want to make sure that it like sits on top of it. And so how to make sure that, well, it is scale of 1, so if you want to have it sit on top, then we just put the y at 1. Cool. So now it sits on top of that. It is at 0, 0. Our group is not at 0, 0, 0, but we'll put it at the center of the scene, and we put it a little bit backwards, so -5. So that's where I want it to be roughly, because then the camera has a nice view at it, because the camera is at 0, 1, -10, so a little bit eye height. Okay, so these transforms are very important, and we have this cube which we're gonna like bring up here and maybe in front, and then a little bit to in front of the, maybe a little bit sideways from the perspective of the camera. So one way to not always have to click the camera to see what it sees is to switch to the game view. So at any time you can switch between the scene and the game view. You can also drag this and actually move it here next to the game view. That's something I'd like to do. Then I have like a more or less a preview of whatever the user sees, and I can. Where's our sphere actually? We need to secure our sphere somehow. We need to bring it back into view and create some kind of like interesting view and have the sphere here. Okay, and we can adjust this view a little bit, and we can also give it like a full HD rendering, and we can adjust the scale here to zoom in or zoom out, right? And one thing I'd like to do is maximize on play. It's activated. Any of these windows, by the way, can like if you right click here, maximize, you can bring them like this, but this is what maximize on play does. Whenever I press the play button, it does this automatically for me. So I will not do this now. I will actually want to maximize the space of my scene. That's what I'm going to do now. Now that I've inserted all these objects, I'm going to rearrange a little bit my editor here. So this is, I like the hierarchy up there. I like to give most of the space to the scene view, and I like it that when these objects are like together. Now I can click them and I can quickly preview whatever their properties are down here. So cool. We have the group, we have the sphere, we have a cube, we have a light. So all the things we need. So let's say I want to adjust a little bit the rotation of the light. So the transform tool that is currently selected is actually the translation tool, or move, as we call it, move tool. If I wanted to do the rotation, I can click here and I could like move it like this to cast a different shadow, add the shadow slightly differently. This looks very interesting. So this actually, what it actually does is it actually adjusts the sun up there. So if I move, because that's my directional light, that directional light, think of it as the position of the light doesn't really matter, so it really makes no difference. It's really just the angle on the scene that matters, because that is a light that is cast from the sun, and well, the sun is the same distance, but it just because the Earth rotates around it. This is what we simulate by actually rotating that light here. Is actually we rotate the world, if you will. I mean, that's not technically true, but it would be in the real world. In any case, so we have a translation tool and a scale tool. So how do I do this without actually clicking them? Well, I know that these up here map to Q, W, E, R, T, and Y. Y is interesting. Y has all of the transform tools activated at the same time. I don't really use this a lot, but if I wanted to do a few different manipulations, this is actually really useful, but I don't want to do it on the light. I actually want to do it on the cube. So here, for example, I want to rotate that cube in a little bit more interesting way, and I also want to make it all the sides a little larger. I could stretch it. This is moving, so I could stretch it by dragging this thing here, stretch it into this, into the Y direction, and maybe have it still a little bit more like floating. And on the right you can see the resulting scene. So this is pretty cool. So Q, W, so I move a lot between scaling and rotation, for example. So scaling and rotation, if I wanted to do that a little bit more. I can, of course, at any time always also enter values here. So for example, position, I can enter 1.5. If I really want to have more cleaner values, I can clean this up a little bit. And I can also drag here, left and right. So I press this area and then drag my mouse while clicking it. I can also do this up and down. You can also do left and right, but like up and down feels more like that's what I'm actually doing. And at any time I can press Control Z to undo. And I could also reset this component. I could reset the position that would place it at 0, 0, 0, which is sometimes useful when you insert a new object, but I don't want to do this right now. So, because I want to leave it like this, and maybe what I'm going to do now is maybe adjust the camera a little bit. So I'm just going to move it a little bit backwards, because I want to see a little bit of the plane. And now I press play and go in full screen view, and this is my scene. And I walked you through most of the basics of the Unity editor, and I hope you found this video useful.